I never imagined that a simple gift at my sister's wedding would unravel 30 years of lies and send my mother to federal prison for nearly 2 decades. Looking back now, I realized there were signs all along. Subtle hints that I wasn't truly part of the family I'd grown up in, but sometimes we're so desperate to belong that we ignore what's right in front of us. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I discovered my entire life was built on a foundation of secrets, how a dying woman I'd never met became the sister I'd always needed, and how the mother who raised me orchestrated a web of deception that would ultimately destroy everything she'd tried so desperately to protect. It started on a beautiful September afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. My younger sister Olivia was getting married at the historic Magnolia Plantation, surrounded by ancient oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. The setting was perfect, like something out of a southern fairy tale, with 200 guests dressed in their finest, sipping champagne as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Olivia looked radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, a $45,000 confection of silk and lace that our mother had insisted on purchasing, despite my father's protests about the expense. But then again, nothing had ever been too good for Olivia. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the daughter who had inherited our mother's delicate features and our grandmother's grace. I stood with the other bridesmaids, trying not to feel self-conscious in the blush pink dress that seemed to wash out my complexion. I'd always been different from the rest of my family, with my father's darker coloring and what my mother called my unfortunate tendency towards sturdiness. Where Olivia was petite and elegant, I was tall and athletic. Where she was bubbly and charming, I was quiet and introspective. The ceremony was beautiful, and I fought back tears as Olivia exchanged vows with Nathan, her college sweetheart, who came from one of Charleston's oldest families. Our mother, Patricia, sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of maternal pride. Our father, James, stood beside me as part of the wedding party, and I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he watched his youngest daughter get married. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photographs beneath the massive oak trees, Olivia pulled all her bridesmaids aside. She had that excited gleam in her eye that usually meant she'd planned some elaborate surprise. And knowing my sister, it would be something extravagant and perfectly Instagram-worthy. "Ladies, I have something special for each of you," she announced, producing a stack of small turquoise boxes that could only be from one place, Tiffany & Co. The other bridesmaids squealed with delight as Olivia handed out the boxes one by one. Inside each was a delicate silver necklace with a small diamond pendant, the kind of gift that would have cost at least $500 per person. I watched as each bridesmaid opened her box, exclaiming over the beautiful jewelry. Olivia helped them put on their necklaces, posing for photos with each one. When she finally turned to me, the last bridesmaid waiting, her smile took on a different quality, something I couldn't quite define, but that made my stomach tighten with unease. "And for you, Emma," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered group, "I have something extra special." She handed me not a small turquoise box, but a larger white one with unfamiliar packaging. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a DNA ancestry testing kit, the kind that had become popular in recent years for people wanting to trace their family heritage. The other bridesmaids fell silent, exchanging glances I pretended not to see. Olivia's smile widened as she watched me stare at the unexpected gift. "I thought this would be perfect for you," she said, her tone sweet, but with an undertone that made my skin prickle. "You're always talking about finding yourself, figuring out where you fit in. Maybe this will help you discover who you really are." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear, including the photographer, who was still snapping pictures. Several people laughed, taking it as a thoughtful, if unusual gift. But I caught the look that passed between Olivia and our mother, a quick glance that spoke volumes. They knew something about me, about my place in this family, and this gift was their way of telling me, without actually saying the words. I forced a smile and thanked her, tucking the box under my arm as the photographer called for more pictures. But for the rest of the reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been handed a bomb disguised as a gift. Every time I caught Olivia's eye, she had that same knowing smile. Every time I looked at my mother, she quickly glanced away. The reception continued late into the night, with dancing and toasts and all the traditional wedding festivities. I played my part, giving a heartfelt speech about my baby sister finding true love, dancing with groomsmen, catching up with relatives I hadn't seen in years. But the white box sat at my table like an accusation, drawing my attention again and again. It was during the father-daughter dance that things took another strange turn. I was standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching my father twirl Olivia around, both of them laughing through the tears. He'd always been a wonderful father, patient and kind, though I'd noticed over the years that he seemed to carry a weight on his shoulders that he never quite explained. As the song ended and the DJ invited other couples to join them on the dance floor, my father caught my eye. He made his way over to me, and I expected him to ask me to dance, as he often did at family gatherings. Instead, he glanced at the table where the DNA kit sat, and his face went pale. "Emma, sweetheart," he said, his voice strained. "What did your sister give you?" I showed him the box, watching as his expression shifted from pale to positively ashen. He gripped my shoulders, his hands trembling more noticeably now. "You can't take that test," he said urgently. "Promise me you won't take it." "Dad, what's wrong? It's just one of those ancestry things. Lots of people do them. Remember when the Johnsons found out they were related to Thomas Jefferson?" He shook his head violently. "No, Emma, you don't understand. Some things are better left unknown. Some secrets should stay buried. Please, promise me." The desperation in his voice scared me. I'd never seen my father like this, so visibly shaken and afraid. But I'd also never felt so clearly that there was something about me, about my place in this family, that everyone knew except me. The gift, my mother's behavior over the years, the way I'd always felt like an outsider, it all suddenly seemed connected to whatever my father was so afraid of me discovering. "Dad, you're scaring me. What secret? What don't I know?" He released my shoulders and stepped back, running a hand through his graying hair. "I can't. Emma, please. Just trust me on this. Don't take the test. Throw it away. Forget about it." But I couldn't forget about it. The box seemed to burn in my hands as I carried it home that night. I placed it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for hours, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to respect my father's wishes, to throw it away and pretend the whole strange incident had never happened. But a larger part, the part that had always felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, needed to know the truth. 3 days later, I opened the box and followed the instructions, spitting into the small tube and sealing it carefully. My hands shook as I packaged it up and dropped it in the mail. Whatever secret my family was keeping, I was going to find out. My father must have sensed what I'd done because he started calling me more frequently, his voice always carrying that same note of barely contained panic. He'd make small talk for a few minutes before inevitably asking if I'd thought more about his request. Each time, I told him not to worry, that everything would be fine. Each time, he ended the call sounding more distressed than before. 6 weeks passed in a strange state of suspended animation. I went to work at the marketing firm where I'd been employed for 5 years, had dinner with friends, attended my book club meetings, all while feeling like I was waiting for something momentous to happen. My mother, who usually called me weekly to update me on family gossip, and not so subtly ask when I was going to find a nice man and settle down, went radio silent. Olivia, back from her honeymoon in Bali, seemed to be watching me with unusual interest whenever we saw each other. At our monthly family dinner in November, she kept making comments about family traditions and the importance of knowing where you come from, all while staring directly at me. Our mother would quickly change the subject each time, but the tension in the room was palpable. It was a cold Tuesday morning in early December when everything changed. I was drinking my coffee and scrolling through emails before work when I saw it. A message from the DNA testing company with the subject line, "Your results are ready." My heart pounded as I clicked on the link and logged into my account. At first, the results seemed fairly standard. I was predominantly European, with the expected mix of Irish, English, and German that aligned with what I knew of my family history. But then I saw it. A section labeled DNA matches with a close family member I'd never heard of. Half-sister, 32 years old, located in Savannah, Georgia. Name, Rachel Morrison. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. A half-sister? How was that possible? My parents had been married for 35 years. They'd dated since college. Their love story was legendary in our family, the kind of romance that everyone pointed to as an example of true commitment. But the science didn't lie. This woman, this Rachel Morrison, shared enough DNA with me to be my half-sister, which meant one of my parents had another child I'd never known about, given that she was 2 years older than me, born when my parents were already married. The implications made me feel sick. My father's desperate pleas suddenly made terrible sense. He'd had an affair. He'd fathered another child. And somehow, my mother and sister knew about it. I was still staring at the screen when a message popped up through the testing site's internal messaging system. It was from Rachel. "Emma! My God, I can't believe I finally found you. Or rather, that you found me. I've been searching for family for months. Please, I know this must be a shock, but I desperately need to talk to you. It's literally a matter of life and death. Please call me." She had included her phone number, and something in the urgency of her message made me pick up my phone before I could think better of it. It rang once before a woman answered, her voice thick with emotion. "Emma? Is this really you?" "Yes, I just got my results. I don't understand what's happening." "I know this must be confusing. I'm sorry to dump this on you, but I'm running out of time. I have stage 4 kidney disease. I've been on dialysis for 2 years, but my condition is deteriorating. My mother isn't a match for donation, and I have no other family. That's why I did the DNA test, hoping to find someone, anyone, who might be able to help." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. This stranger, this sister I'd never known existed, was dying and had turned to DNA testing as a last resort. I sank into a chair, trying to process everything at once. "Rachel, This is a lot to take in. I didn't even know you existed until 5 minutes ago. My father, our father, he begged me not to take this test. Now I understand why." "He knows about me?" Her voice was small, hopeful, and hurt at the same time. "I think so. I think my whole family knows, somehow. My sister gave me the DNA test as a wedding gift, like she wanted me to find out." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "My mother always said my father was married, that he couldn't be part of our lives. She never told me his name, never let me try to find him. But when I got sick, she finally told me I had siblings somewhere. She said she'd promised never to interfere with his family, but she couldn't watch me die without at least trying to find you." We talked for an hour, Rachel filling in pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. Her mother, Linda, had worked at the same accounting firm as our father over 30 years ago. They'd had an affair that lasted nearly a year before Linda discovered she was pregnant. According to Rachel, our father had wanted to leave his marriage, but something had happened to change his mind. "Mom never told me exactly what," Rachel said, "but she said your mother made sure she understood that coming forward would have consequences. Mom was young and scared, so she took the money your father offered and left town. She raised me alone, never married, never had other children. I think she never got over him. The money. Of course there had been money. My family's comfortable lifestyle, the private schools, the expensive weddings. I'd always wondered how my father afforded it all on his salary. Now I suspected I knew. I agreed to meet Rachel in person, despite every rational part of my brain screaming that this was too much, too fast. But when someone tells you they're dying and you might be their only hope, how do you say no? Especially when that someone shares your DNA, your father, your history you never knew you had. I called in sick to work and drove the 3 hours to Savannah that afternoon. We'd agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the historic district, neutral ground for what promised to be an emotional encounter. I arrived early and sat nursing a latte, watching the door with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew her the moment she walked in. It was like looking at a slightly altered version of myself. She had our father's eyes, the same distinctive green gold that I saw in the mirror every morning. Her hair was darker than mine, closer to black than brown, but the shape of her face, the way she carried herself, it was unmistakably familiar. She spotted me immediately, too, and her face crumpled with emotion as she made her way to my table. We stared at each other for a long moment before she whispered, "You look just like him." "So do you," I managed to reply. We sat down together, two strangers who shared a father and nothing else. Rachel looked tired, worn down by illness and disappointment. She told me about growing up without a father, about her mother's struggles to make ends meet, about always feeling like half of her was missing. "I used to make up stories about why my dad couldn't be with us," she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup as if for warmth. "Maybe he was a spy who had to keep us safe by staying away, or a soldier deployed overseas. Anything but the truth, that he chose his real family over us." The phrase real family stung, probably more than she'd intended, because what did that make her? What did that make me? If everyone in my real family had known the truth except me, Rachel must have seen something in my expression because she quickly apologized. "I didn't mean it like that. I know this isn't your fault. You didn't even know I existed." "No, but apparently everyone else did. My sister, my mother. They've known all along. Do you know what that's like? To realize your whole life has been a performance, and you're the only one who didn't know you were on stage." We talked for hours, sharing stories and comparing notes on our very different upbringings. Rachel had struggled financially, but been loved fiercely by her mother. I'd had every material advantage, but always felt like an outsider in my own family. Neither of us had gotten the whole package, the complete family experience we'd both craved. As the afternoon wore on, Rachel's energy visibly flagged. The disease was taking its toll, and I could see the exhaustion in every line of her face. Finally, I asked the question that had been hovering between us since the moment she'd contacted me. "What exactly do you need from me, Rachel?" She looked at me with those familiar eyes, full of hope and fear in equal measure. "I need a kidney. The doctors say a family member would be the best match, the best chance for a successful transplant. My mom was tested, but she wasn't compatible. You're my last hope." I'd known this was coming, had known from her first message what she would ask, but hearing the words out loud, seeing the desperation in her face, made it real in a way that terrified me. She was asking me to undergo major surgery, to give up an organ, for someone I'd just met, someone whose very existence had shattered my understanding of my family. "I know it's a huge ask," Rachel continued quickly. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm 32 years old, and I don't want to die. I have so much I still want to do, so much life I want to live. Please, will you at least get tested, just to see if you're even a match?" How could I say no to that? Despite everything, despite the shock and betrayal and confusion, I couldn't look at this woman who shared my blood and refuse her the chance at life. I heard myself agreeing to get tested, saw the relief and gratitude transform her face, felt the weight of what I'd just committed to settle on my shoulders. We exchanged phone numbers and made plans for me to come back to Savannah for the testing. As we prepared to leave, Rachel's mother arrived to pick her up. Linda Morrison was a small woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that held decades of secrets. She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance, as if daring me to judge her for the choices she'd made. "You look like your mother," she said quietly. "Same bone structure. She was always beautiful, even when she was threatening me." "She threatened you?" Linda's laugh was bitter. "Oh, yes. Your mother made it very clear what would happen if I ever tried to contact your father again, or if I revealed Rachel's existence. She knew about the affair almost from the beginning, you see. But she couldn't have children of her own then, so she tolerated it. Right up until I got pregnant." My mind reeled. My mother had known about the affair while it was happening, had tolerated it? None of this made sense with the woman I knew, the one who prided herself on her perfect family, her perfect marriage. "I don't understand," I said weakly. "Your mother had been trying to get pregnant for years," Linda explained, her arm protective around Rachel's shoulders. "Multiple miscarriages, failed treatments. The doctors had all but told her it was impossible. So when your father came to her, confessed the affair and my pregnancy, she saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To keep her family intact. She told James she would forgive the affair, stay in the marriage, but only if he cut all contact with us. She'd raise his children, any children they managed to have, but Rachel and I had to disappear. The money he gave us was her idea, a payoff to ensure we stayed gone." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too crowded. I needed air, needed space to process what I was hearing. My mother, the woman who'd raised me, who'd always seemed so moral and upright, had essentially bought off her husband's mistress and child? But you did have children, I said, grasping for something that made sense. My mother did get pregnant. With me, with Olivia. Linda's expression softened slightly. The mind is a powerful thing. Sometimes when women stop trying so hard, when the pressure is off, their bodies finally cooperate. Your mother got pregnant with you just 6 months after Rachel was born. Maybe it was the stress relief of having dealt with the situation. Maybe it was just timing. But yes, she finally got the children she'd always wanted. Except she didn't want me, I said, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. I look like him. I look like the affair, the betrayal. That's why she's always favored Olivia. That's why I've never been good enough. Neither woman contradicted me. We all stood there in the fading afternoon light. 3 women bound together by secrets and lies, and the choices made before some of us were even born. I drove home in a daze, my phone buzzing constantly, with calls I didn't answer. By the time I reached my apartment in Charleston, there were 15 missed calls from my father, 6 from my mother, and a dozen texts from Olivia asking if I was okay, if I needed to talk. I ignored them all and poured myself a large glass of wine, trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. My father had cheated. My mother had known. They'd paid off his mistress and child to disappear. And everyone in my family had known except me. The next morning, I couldn't avoid them any longer. My father was literally standing outside my apartment building when I left for work, looking haggard and desperate. He'd clearly been there all night. "Emma, sweetheart, please. We need to talk." "Yes, Dad, we really do," I said, my voice harder than I'd ever used with him before. "Would you like to start with the affair, the secret daughter, or the cover-up? I'm flexible." He flinched at each word like they were physical blows. "Can we go inside?" "Please." I led him into my apartment, watching as he sank onto my couch like his bones had turned to water. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. Then I remembered Rachel's face, her desperate hope, and my sympathy evaporated. "I met her yesterday," I said simply. "Rachel, your other daughter, the one you abandoned." "I didn't abandon her," he said weakly. "I sent money every month until she turned 18. I made sure they were taken care of. Financially, maybe. But what about emotionally? What about being a father to her? She grew up thinking she wasn't good enough for you to acknowledge. Your mother, don't." I cut him off sharply. Say, "Don't you dare blame this all on Mom. You made the choice to have an affair. You made the choice to abandon your child. Own it." He did start crying then. Great, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. I'd never seen my father cry before, and part of me wanted to comfort him. But a larger part, the part that had just discovered 30 years of lies, stayed firmly in my chair across from him. "I loved her," he finally managed to say. "Linda, I loved her and I was going to leave your mother. But then Linda got pregnant and your mother, she made it clear what would happen. She'd take everything. The house, my business, she'd make sure I never saw you or any future children we might have. And she'd destroy Linda's reputation, make sure she never worked in finance again. So you chose the easy path." "I chose you," he said fiercely. "Your mother was pregnant with you by then. I couldn't leave her, couldn't abandon one child for another. I thought I was doing the right thing, providing for everyone, making sure everyone was taken care of. Everyone except Rachel. She's dying, Dad. Did you know that? Your daughter is dying, and she reached out through DNA testing, as a last resort, to find family who might save her life." The color drained from his face completely. "Dying?" I explained about the kidney disease, about her need for a transplant. With every word, he seemed to age years before my eyes. When I told him I'd agreed to be tested as a potential donor, he gripped my hands with desperate strength. "You can't," he said urgently. "Emma, there are things you don't know. Complications. Your mother? What about my mother? What else has she done?" But before he could answer, the door to my apartment flew open. My mother stood there, perfectly composed as always in her St. John's suit and pearls. But her eyes were wild with something I'd never seen before. "So," she said, her voice like ice, You finally know the truth. The three of us faced off in my small living room, 30 years of secrets and lies finally exposed to the light. My mother moved into the room with her usual grace, but I could see the tension in every line of her body. Patricia, my father said weakly, I was just explaining. Explaining what exactly? How you betrayed our marriage? How you humiliated me with that woman? Or how you've been mooning over your lost love for 3 decades while I raised your children and kept your secrets? The venom in her voice was startling. I'd seen my mother angry before, but this was something different, something deeper and more dangerous. You knew, I said. You've known all along about Rachel. She turned those wild eyes on me, and for the first time in my life, I saw real hatred there. Of course I knew. I knew about the affair 3 weeks after it started. Your father never could hide anything from me. I watched him fall in love with another woman while I was injecting myself with fertility drugs and praying for a miracle. So why didn't you leave him? Her laugh was bitter and sharp. Leave him? And give up everything I'd worked for? Let him run off with his secretary and leave me as the discarded first wife? No, I'm not that kind of woman. So instead, you threatened a pregnant woman and made sure a child grew up without a father. I protected my family, she snapped. I did what I had to do to keep us together, and it worked, didn't it? You and Olivia had a father, you had a stable home, the best education, every opportunity. Would you rather have grown up like her, like that girl, struggling and abandoned? Her name is Rachel, I said quietly, and she's my sister. My mother's face contorted with rage. She is nothing to you. She's a mistake, a reminder of your father's weakness. I've spent 30 years making sure she stayed where she belonged, out of our lives. Is that why you had Olivia give me the DNA test? You wanted me to find out? For the first time, my mother looked genuinely surprised. What? At the wedding, Olivia gave all the bridesmaids Tiffany necklaces except me. I got a DNA test. She said it would help me find out who I really am. My parents exchanged a look of confusion that seemed genuine. My father shook his head. We didn't know about that. Olivia must have. The truth hit me like a lightning bolt. Olivia had known, but not because our parents told her. She'd found out on her own somehow and decided I deserved to know too. In her own twisted way, she'd been trying to help me. It doesn't matter how I found out, I said. What matters is that Rachel needs help, and I'm going to get tested to see if I can donate a kidney. No. My mother's voice was flat, final. I forbid it. You forbid it? I'm 34 years old, Mother. You can't forbid me from doing anything. You stupid girl, she hissed. Do you think this is just about keeping the secret? Do you think I've spent 30 years protecting this family just to watch you throw it all away for a stranger? She's not a stranger. She's my sister. She's nothing! My mother was shouting now, all composure gone. And if you do this, if you acknowledge her, help her, you'll be nothing too. I'll make sure of it. The threat hung in the air between us. My father tried to intervene, reaching for my mother's arm, but she shook him off violently. This is your fault, she told him. All of it. If you'd just been able to control yourself, none of this would be happening. But no, you had to fall in love with that whore, had to create this mess that I've been cleaning up for 30 years. Patricia, please, my father begged. Think about what you're saying. Think about Emma. I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about how she's always been so difficult, always asking questions, never quite fitting in. And now I know why. She's just like you, weak, sentimental, ready to throw everything away for some misguided sense of duty. Her words cut deep because they confirmed what I'd always suspected. She'd never loved me the way she loved Olivia. I'd always been the reminder of my father's betrayal, the child who looked too much like him, who asked too many questions, who couldn't just accept the perfect family facade. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you. Get out of my apartment! My father looked like he wanted to protest, but my mother was already moving toward the door. You'll regret this, she said, pausing in the doorway. When you're lying on an operating table, giving up a piece of yourself for someone who means nothing, you'll understand what I've tried to protect you from. They left, and I sank onto my couch, shaking from the confrontation. Everything I'd believed about my family, my life, had been shattered in the space of days. But through all the chaos and pain, one thing remained clear. Rachel needed help, and I was possibly the only one who could provide it. 2 days later, I drove back to Savannah for the testing. The hospital was a gleaming modern facility, all glass and steel and efficient medical precision. Rachel was already there with her mother, looking even more fragile than she had at our first meeting. The testing process was extensive: blood work, tissue typing, cross-matching, psychological evaluation. The transplant coordinator, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, explained everything in detail. Even if you're a biological match, we need to make sure you're physically and emotionally prepared for donation, she said. This is a major surgery with real risks. You need to be absolutely certain this is something you want to do. Was I certain? I'd known Rachel for less than a week. But as I looked at her in the waiting room, hooked up to a portable dialysis machine, fighting for every day of life, I knew I couldn't walk away. The initial results came back surprisingly quickly. I was a match. Not just a match, but what Dr. Chen called an excellent match. Our tissue types were remarkably compatible, which would reduce the risk of rejection. It's like you were made to be her donor, the doctor said with a smile. Sometimes we see this with siblings. It's quite remarkable. Rachel cried when she heard the news. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you," over and over, until I was crying too. Linda stood apart, watching us with an unreadable expression. "I need to tell you something," Linda said, when Rachel stepped away to call her boyfriend with the good news. "About your mother. About what really happened all those years ago." We found a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, and Linda told me the whole story. The affair had started innocently enough. Two colleagues working late on a project shared dinners that turned into something more. But what my father hadn't known was that my mother had orchestrated the whole thing. "She knew I was attracted to him," Linda said, stirring her coffee absently. "She made sure we were assigned to the same projects, suggested he ask me for help with certain accounts. At the time, I thought I was just lucky to be working so closely with him. But later, after everything fell apart, I realized she'd been setting us up. Why would she do that? Because she needed someone to blame for the failure of her marriage. She couldn't have children, and in her mind, that made her a failure as a wife. If James left her for another woman, she could be the victim instead of the barren wife who couldn't give him children. It was so calculated, so cold, that I had trouble reconciling it with the mother I'd known. But then I thought about all the small cruelties over the years, the way she'd always made me feel like I wasn't quite good enough, and it started to make a horrible kind of sense. "But she did get pregnant," I pointed out. "With me." Linda nodded. "That was the part she didn't plan for. When she found out about my pregnancy, something shifted. Maybe it was the stress, maybe it was finally letting go of the pressure to conceive, but she got pregnant almost immediately after. And suddenly, the affair she'd been prepared to use as an exit strategy became a threat to the family she could finally have. So she threatened you. She did more than threaten. She had photos of James and me together, photos I later realized she must have arranged to have taken. She had documentation of supposed financial irregularities in my work that could have cost me my license. She made it clear that if I didn't disappear, she'd destroy not just my career, but my entire life. And my father just went along with it? Linda's smile was sad. "Your father was caught between two women and two children. Patricia made sure he understood that fighting her meant losing everything: his business, his reputation, access to you. She was from one of Charleston's most prominent families. She had connections, resources. We were just two people who'd made a mistake and created a life in the process." I thought about my mother's family, the old Charleston Society connections she maintained so carefully, the charity boards, the country club memberships, the network of powerful friends who would have absolutely taken her side in any scandal. Linda was right. My mother had held all the cards. Over the next few weeks, as we prepared for the transplant surgery, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Olivia finally called me back and admitted she'd discovered the truth about Rachel years ago when she'd done her own genealogy research for a college project. "I found the records of Dad's payments to Linda Morrison," she said over the phone, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. 20 years of monthly transfers. When I confronted Mom about it, she told me everything, made me promise never to tell you. So you gave me a DNA test instead. I couldn't stand it anymore, Em. Watching Mom treat you like you were somehow less than me. Knowing why, but not being able to say anything. You deserve to know the truth. And you thought a public humiliation at your wedding was the way to do it? Olivia was quiet for a moment. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I think I was angry. At Mom, at Dad, at the whole situation. And maybe I took some of that out on you. I'm sorry. It was the first time in our entire lives that Olivia had apologized to me for anything. I didn't quite know how to respond. Nathan left me, she added quietly, after everything came out at Thanksgiving dinner. He said he couldn't be part of a family built on so many lies. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner I'd missed, too overwhelmed by everything to face the family gathering. Apparently, it had been quite the scene, with Dad's confession, Mom's denials, and extended family members slowly piecing together 30 years of deception. I'm sorry, Liv, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Don't be. He was right. We are built on lies. But maybe now we can build something better. The surgery was scheduled for the week before Christmas. As the date approached, the harassment started. First, it was just phone calls, hang-ups at all hours, heavy breathing on the other end. Then came the letters, anonymous notes warning me about the dangers of surgery, reminding me that actions have consequences. I knew it was my mother or someone she'd hired. The whole thing felt like a campaign of psychological warfare designed to make me back out of the donation. But if she thought I could be intimidated, she'd miscalculated. Each threat only made me more determined to go through with it. The breaking point came 3 days before the surgery. I'd spent the day in Savannah doing final preoperative tests, and I returned to my apartment to find the door slightly open. Inside, everything had been disturbed. Not ransacked exactly, but touched, moved, rearranged just enough to let me know someone had been there. On my kitchen counter was a manila envelope filled with photos. Pictures of me over the past few weeks. At the grocery store, at work, entering the hospital. The message was clear. You're being watched. I called the police, filed a report, but without evidence of who was behind it, there was little they could do. I installed new locks, a security system. But the damage was done. I no longer felt safe in my own home. It was Linda who suggested I stay with them until the surgery. Despite the circumstances that had brought us together, she'd been nothing but kind to me, and Rachel's small apartment had a comfortable guest room. I packed a bag and drove to Savannah that night, feeling like a refugee from my own life. The night before the surgery, Rachel and I stayed up late talking. She told me about her life, her work as a teacher, her dreams of traveling once she was healthy. She showed me photos from her childhood, pictures of birthday parties and school plays where only one parent was ever present. I used to tell my friends my dad was dead, she admitted. It was easier than explaining why he never came to anything, never called on holidays. Mom never said a bad word about him, but kids figure things out. Do you hate him? I asked. For choosing us over you? Rachel considered the question carefully. I did for a long time, but holding on to that anger was killing me faster than the kidney disease. I had to let it go, had to accept that he made the choice he thought was best at the time, even if it wasn't best for me. Her grace in the face of such abandonment humbled me. I'd grown up with every advantage, 2 parents, financial security, and I'd still felt like an outsider. She'd had none of that and somehow managed to become a kind, generous person who could forgive the unforgivable. What about my mother? I asked. Can you forgive her? Rachel's expression hardened slightly. Your mother is different. She didn't just make a choice in a difficult situation. She actively worked to keep me from knowing my father, from having any connection to half my heritage. That's harder to forgive. We were quiet for a moment, both lost in thought. Then Rachel reached over and took my hand. I need you to know something, she said. If you change your mind, even tomorrow morning, even as they're wheeling us into surgery, I'll understand. This is an enormous thing you're doing, and not just physically. You're risking your relationship with your family, your mother's wrath, all for someone you barely know. You're my sister, I said simply. That's all I need to know. The morning of the surgery dawned cold and clear. I checked my phone to find dozens of messages from my family. My father begging me to reconsider. Olivia offering to drive to Savannah to be with me. And one from my mother that simply said, "This is your last chance." I turned off my phone and headed to the hospital with Rachel and Linda. The pre-operative preparation was a blur of consent forms and medical procedures. They put us in adjacent beds in the pre-op area, and I could see Rachel's face, pale but determined. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I confirmed, though my heart was racing. They were about to wheel us into surgery when a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of security being called. Then my mother burst into the pre-op area, looking wild-eyed and desperate. "Stop!" she shouted. "You can't do this! I won't let you!" Security guards were right behind her, but she managed to reach my bedside before they could stop her. Up close, I could see she hadn't slept, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and manic. "Please, Emma," she said, gripping my hand with painful force. "You don't understand what you're doing. The risks, the complications. You could die." "The risks are minimal, Mother. I'm healthy, young. The doctors have explained everything." "No!" She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "There are things you don't know. Medical history. Genetic factors. You can't do this." Dr. Chen appeared, calm and professional. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. We've done extensive testing. Emma is cleared for surgery." "You don't understand," my mother insisted. "There's a genetic condition, blood clotting disorder. It runs in the family. Tell them, Emma. Tell them about your grandmother." I stared at her, confused. "Grandmother died of a heart attack." "No!" "She died of complications from surgery. A routine gallbladder operation. She had a clotting disorder that no one knew about until it was too late. You could have it too, Dr. Chen immediately took this seriously, pulling up my medical records on her tablet. "Mrs. Hartley. Patricia Hartley. I'm her mother." "Mrs. Hartley, I appreciate your concern, but Emma's blood work showed no signs of clotting disorders. We test for these things specifically." "Those tests don't catch everything," my mother said desperately. "Please, just delay the surgery. Do more tests. I'm begging you." For a moment, I wavered. What if she was telling the truth? What if there really was some genetic condition that could put me at risk? But then I looked at Rachel, saw the terror in her eyes at the thought of losing this chance, and I knew what my mother was doing. "She's lying," I said quietly. "My grandmother died of a heart attack at age 82. I've seen the death certificate. This is just another manipulation." My mother's face transformed, the desperation replaced by cold fury. "Fine, do what you want. Ooh. But when you die on that operating table, remember that I tried to save you." Security finally managed to escort her out, but her words echoed in my mind as they prepared me for surgery. What if she wasn't lying? What if there really was something in our medical history I didn't know about? The anesthesiologist was saying something about counting backward from 10 when a nurse rushed in, her face flushed with urgency. "Dr. Chen, we need to speak with you immediately. There's been a development with the blood work." My heart sank. Had my mother been telling the truth after all? Dr. Chen returned a few minutes later, her expression grave. "Emma, Rachel, I'm afraid we have a problem. The final cross-match showed an unexpected antibody reaction. It appears you both carry a rare genetic marker that significantly increases the risk of complications during transplant surgery." "What kind of complications?" Linda asked, her voice tight with fear. "Blood clotting issues, primarily. The risk of stroke or embolism during surgery would be extremely high for both patients. I'm sorry, but we cannot proceed with the transplant between you two." Rachel's sob was the most heartbreaking sound I'd ever heard. All that hope, destroyed in an instant. I reached for her hand across the gap between our beds, both of us crying. "What about other family members?" Linda asked desperately. "Are there other options?" Dr. Chen hesitated. "We would need to find another family member who's both a compatible match and doesn't carry this genetic marker. The chances are slim, but not impossible." Through my tears, a thought struck me. "Olivia, my sister, she could be tested." "No," Rachel said immediately. "I can't ask another person to do this. You've already done so much, risked so much. but I was already reaching for my phone, calling Olivia's number. She answered on the first ring. Em? How did the surgery go? I've been worried sick. It didn't. There were complications. Liv, I need you to listen carefully. I explained the situation, the genetic marker, the need for another donor. Olivia was silent for a long moment after I finished. You want me to get tested, she said finally, to maybe donate a kidney to Dad's other daughter. I know it's a lot to ask. I'll do it. Her response was immediate and firm. When Mom finds out, she'll probably disown me too, but I'll do it. Give me the hospital information. I can be there in 3 hours. True to her word, Olivia arrived that afternoon. She looked different than I'd seen her in years. No designer clothes or perfect makeup, just jeans and a sweater, her face set with determination. Where is she? She asked simply. I led her to Rachel's room, where my sister was back in her regular hospital bed, hooked up to dialysis, looking defeated. The two sisters studied each other, one raised with everything, one with nothing, both products of the same father's choices. I'm Olivia, my sister said finally. I'm sorry it took so long to meet you. Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. You don't have to do this. You don't even know me. No, but Emma does. And if she says you're worth saving, that's good enough for me. Olivia turned to Dr. Chen. What do I need to do? The testing process started all over again, this time with Olivia. I stayed with Rachel while we waited, the three of us forming an unlikely trio. Olivia, to my surprise, was genuinely interested in getting to know Rachel. She asked questions about her life, her work, her interests, treating her like the sister she'd never known she had. Mom's going to lose her mind, Olivia said at one point, almost cheerfully. But you know what? I'm tired of living by her rules. Nathan was right. Our family is built on lies, and I'm done perpetuating them. The test results came back the next day. Olivia was a match, and more importantly, she didn't carry the genetic marker that made me unsuitable. Surgery was scheduled for the following week, giving everyone time to prepare. My mother's reaction was swift and vicious. She showed up at Olivia's house the day after the test results, and their confrontation was so loud the neighbors called the police. Olivia called me afterward, shaken but resolute. She threatened to cut me off, she said. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family support. She said I'm choosing a stranger over my own mother. Are you okay with that? Olivia laughed, but it was brittle. You know what? I am. I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, and for what? To maintain her facade? To pretend we're this perfect family when we're actually built on threats and lies? I'm done, Em. I'm done being her puppet. The week leading up to the surgery was surreal. My father, freed from my mother's immediate influence, finally reached out to Rachel. Their first meeting was awkward and tearful, 30 years of absence hanging between them. But he showed up, and that was something. Linda watched their reunion with a complexity of emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. This was the man she'd loved, who'd abandoned her and their child, but she was gracious, allowing him the chance to finally know his daughter. I don't forgive you, Rachel told him honestly. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I'm willing to try to build something now, if you are. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know I don't deserve it, but yes. Please, I want to try. The morning of the surgery, take 2, dawned bright and clear. This time, there were no last-minute complications, no dramatic interruptions. Olivia and Rachel were prepped and ready, both nervous but determined. Thank you, Rachel said to both of us, over and over. Thank you for giving me a chance at life. Thank you, Olivia replied, for giving us a chance to be real sisters, all three of us. The surgery took several hours. Linda, my father and I waited together in a strange familial configuration, the ex-mistress, the cheating husband, and the daughter who'd blown up everyone's secrets. We didn't talk much, but there was something almost peaceful about the shared vigil. Dr. Chen finally emerged, smiling. Both surgeries went perfectly. They're both in recovery and doing well. The kidney is already producing urine, which is an excellent sign. We all cried then, the relief overwhelming. Rachel would live. Olivia had done an incredibly selfless thing, and maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the ashes of our destroyed family. The recovery was challenging for both sisters. I split my time between their rooms, helping where I could. My father was there every day, trying to make up for 30 years of absence. Even Linda seemed to soften toward him, though she maintained appropriate boundaries. The only one absent was our mother. She'd made good on her threats, cutting off both Olivia and me completely. The family home was off limits, our trust funds frozen, our very existence denied. Extended family members were forced to choose sides, and many chose the path of least resistance, my mother's. But sitting in that hospital room, watching Rachel's color improve day by day, seeing Olivia and her bonding over their shared experience, I realized I didn't care. My mother had spent 30 years controlling everyone with money and threats. We were free of that now, even if freedom came with a price. 2 weeks after the surgery, Rachel was discharged. She could go home, back to her life, but with a future she hadn't dared hope for. The kidney was functioning perfectly, all signs of rejection absent. She would need to take anti-rejection medication for the rest of her life, but she would have a life. "I don't know how to thank you," she said to Olivia, who was still recovering, but improving daily. "You saved my life." "We're sisters," Olivia said simply. "It's what sisters do." A month later, we all gathered for Sunday dinner at Rachel's apartment. It had become our new tradition. The three sisters, Linda, and our father, trying to forge something new. The conversations were still sometimes stilted, the history too heavy to ignore completely, but we were trying. It was during dessert that my father cleared his throat nervously. "I have something to tell you all. I've filed for divorce." The room went silent. After 35 years, he was finally leaving my mother. "She's not taking it well," he continued unnecessarily. "But I can't live with someone who would threaten her own children, who would let hatred consume her so completely. I should have done this 30 years ago." "Better late than never," Linda said quietly, and there was something in her voice that made my father look at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. 6 months later, at Rachel's one-year celebration dinner, marking a year since her successful transplant, my father and Linda announced they were dating again. It should have been weird, probably was weird, but somehow it also felt right. They'd found their way back to each other after 3 decades, older and hopefully wiser. My mother's divorce settlement was generous, but she remained bitter and alone. She'd kept the family home, the country club membership, the society connections, but she'd lost both her daughters and the husband she'd schemed so hard to keep. Sometimes I drove past the house and saw her through the windows, moving throughout those perfect rooms like a ghost. I thought about reaching out, about trying to bridge the gap she'd created, but every time I started to dial her number, I remembered her face that day in the hospital, the hatred in her eyes when she looked at me. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Olivia rebuilt her life with remarkable resilience. She went back to school, getting her master's in social work inspired by Rachel's journey. She met someone new, a fellow student named Marcus, who loved her for who she was, not her family connections or trust fund. Their wedding was small, intimate, with only the people who truly mattered present. Rachel became the sister I'd always wanted, but never knew I needed. We talked daily, shared dinners weekly, built the kind of relationship that should have existed all along. Her health remained stable, the kidney functioning perfectly, giving her the life she'd almost lost. And me? I finally understood why I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family. It wasn't because there was something wrong with me. It was because I'd been a reminder of everything my mother wanted to forget. But in finding Rachel, in building our new family configuration, I'd also found myself. The DNA test that started it all sat on my bookshelf, a reminder of how one moment of truth can shatter decades of lies. Olivia had given it to me, thinking it would help me discover who I really was. She'd been right, just not in the way any of us expected. I discovered I was a sister, not just to the one I'd grown up with, but to the one who'd been hidden away. I discovered I was stronger than my mother's manipulations, braver than my father's cowardice, and capable of choosing love over fear. Most importantly, I discovered that family isn't just about blood or DNA or shared history. It's about showing up, taking risks, and choosing each other even when, especially when, it cost you everything. Rachel likes to say I saved her life by getting tested, by starting the chain of events that led to her transplant. But the truth is, she saved mine too. She showed me what real strength looks like, what forgiveness can do, what family really means. We still gather every Sunday for dinner, our strange little family born from secrets and lies, but held together by choice and love. My father and Linda finally together after all these years. Olivia and Marcus, building their own future. Rachel, healthy and thriving. And me, no longer the outsider, but an integral part of something real and true. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about my mother alone in that big house, surrounded by her perfect things and poisonous memories. I wonder if she ever regrets the choices she made, the family she destroyed in her quest to control everyone around her. But mostly, I just feel grateful that her reign of manipulation is over, that we're free to be who we really are. The doormat daughter, who always tried to please everyone, she's gone, replaced by someone who knows her own worth, who understands that some gifts, like Olivia's gift of life to Rachel, are worth more than any trust fund or family name. And that DNA test that started it all, it sits on my bookshelf still, a reminder that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, the ones we fight for, the ones we build from the ashes of what came before. It was, as Olivia had said that day at her wedding, exactly what I needed to discover who I really was. Not the disappointment, not the outsider, not the daughter who could never quite measure up, but a sister, a fighter, a woman who chose love over fear and truth over lies. And that discovery? That was worth everything it cost.